friend. Many of you know her. She's been here several times. This is Monica Boseff from Romania. She became a Christian and a Nazarene when the borders opened of Romania and communists fell. We sent missionaries in, John and Margaret Scott, right away. They needed a translator and got connected with Monica. She was not a Christian. She was not anything. I mean, she was a person, but she didn't have any faith. That's what I meant to say. And just in contact with them, you bring somebody into the presence of God, and it changes their life. And it changed her life. Her and her husband are the pastors at the Blessing Church in Bucharest, Romania. One night, in the middle of the night, God woke her up and gave her a huge burden and a huge commission. He put the victims of sex trafficking on her heart. And Romania is the #1 country for human trafficking. So this is a really big burden. And she has been relentless in her pursuit to bring healing and hope and restoration in that situation. She's been recognized by the U.S. State Department for her work on human trafficking awareness. And so, please welcome her. Thank you.
Bună dimineața. Good morning and blessings. In the name of Christ, from your sisters and brothers whom you haven't met yet, hopefully you will sometime soon, from the Blessing Church of the Nazarene in Bucharest, Romania, which my husband and I are honored to pastor. Thank you, Deborah, for bringing up John and Margaret. When the communism fell in 1989, Romanians, I'm not going to say all of us, but 99% of us were very, very suspicious. This is one thing that communism, was really good at teaching you, how to be suspicious of anybody and everybody, right? Well, for good reasons, because you never knew who exactly from your own family in, a small circle, extended circle, or your, neighbors had become an informer. And so you were always looking out, for who am I sitting next to? What am I going to say this time? And so in 1992, I found out about this Nazarene, the missionary couple who are looking for translators through a friend, and having not one clue of what a missionary is and what he or she does, I told my husband about this job opportunity. We were not Christians. And I said, well, I just talked to them and they invited us to come over. And he's like, okay, so where do they live? I'm like, they live on our side of the city. And he looked at me like, you got it all wrong. I'm like, no. So the south part of the city is a income average population, maybe slightly above average. But back then, really, barely making it through. And he's like, they can't live on our side of the city. I said, honey, this is the address, we're going there. So we ring the doorbell, and the moment the door opens, there's big smiles, and open arms welcome us, and we both froze. I'm a little more, I'm the extrovert between the two of us, and he's the introvert. So an introvert doesn't need, a lot of things to become more introvert. That's what happened to Christy. And John and Margaret said, oh, so my goodness, we're so happy you're here. And they just hugged us, and loved us into their home. For the entire time we were there, my husband was still as a statue. I'm like, is he still breathing? Did not utter a sound. Dead serious. My conversation with them was over. We went out the door, and at that moment he turned around and said, no, don't you dare trust these people. They're spies. I said, excuse me? They're American spies. Yeah, Ronnie, you're right, honey. On our side of the city, fighting cockroaches the size of cats, right? This is where any American spy would go and stay, right? It was not even a month into my time with them when I went home and I told Christy, I said, I have no idea what they have, whether it's a bacteria or a virus or whatever kind of bug they have, I want to have it. I want to live life the way they do. I want to breathe, that love and life they have. I am done being gray in my heart. I'm done being so soul, in my spirit. I want to have what they have. Had they ever said to me, oh, you little poor thing, you're headed straight to hell, honey. Let me tell you the story of salvation. I would have been out the door, not even looking back. They loved and served and loved and served, and God only He knows how much we tried their patience, their intelligence. Deborah must remember some episodes, And they kept on loving, and they kept on serving. And that has been the model that when I said yes to Christ, I realized that, boy, whatever thing I thought they have is nothing and no one but Jesus. Had any of you ever been skydiving? Oh, wonderful. Well, so about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I came here, and I have a friend in Houston, and she asked me, what is the wild thing that I want to do, one crazy thing that I want to do? And I'm like, I want to go skydiving. Of course, everybody back home, or everybody knows I'm already crazy, but how crazy I am, that they don't know yet. And so I said, I want to go skydiving. She's like, this is fantastic. My son is a skydiving instructor. And so she's put it all together for me. And here we are at that place, I'm all dressed up, that I have to look at the video first. And everything looks perfect. You're sitting, on safe ground, on a chair comfortably. And you look at that thing, they show you, how you're going to go up in the air, what's going to happen. Everything is fun. And then they put this, suit on you and the harness, and then you're in front of that tiny nutshell, which they call plane, right, which is going to take you up in the air. I'm like, oh boy. And here we are. We're about 4 with our instructors. And I know that my instructor is sitting right behind me on that tiny bench. And we go up in the air, and all of a sudden, that very thin, super thin door, rolls up. And you're facing the nothingness is right there. All of a sudden, of course, I had to have earrings on, right? Because, no one goes skydiving without earrings on, right? And so the moment he put the goggles on and tightened, that belt, in my earrings were flying out in the air. And then he's right behind me, and he said, I'm going to, tap on your shoulders 3 times. We're going next to the edge right at the edge of the plane. And when it's 3, we're going to jump. I'm like, why do I have to be the first? What have I done? And here I am, 1, 2, and out the window, or out the door, whatever, because it feels like a window. That's the size of it. And you have no idea what's happening to you. You don't know, because the air, just hits you, and then you realize, why you had to have the goggles on, because otherwise your eyeball, would have probably popped out, You don't know what's going on with you. You're just going down. And then, Kelsey asked me, would you like to, open the parachute? Sure, right. But who's looking at the altimeter? Because Moni definitely isn't. I'm like, and he's tapping on my shoulder and realizing that I have to, inflate the parachute. Open up the parachute, which I do. And all of a sudden, that messy, flying out, in the air like a piece of paper, all of a sudden makes sense, because you get to have the panorama. You get to see the beauty all of a sudden. And then, you're actually, guarding the parachute, to the left or to the right, whichever way you want. And yet, to realize that, goodness, I had no idea it can be so beautiful. Landing, no, it depends on how skillful you are or your instructor, but it's still good. That is exactly how it felt to us when we skydived in fighting human trafficking. We had absolutely no idea what it would mean. Why do we have to have the spiritual goggles on? Why do we have to have the armor of God as our suit? Why do we have to have the Holy Spirit as our parachute to guide us and not let us just, hit the ground, full speed and turn into pieces and dust? And while we're doing this, we get to see the survivors who all of a sudden, turn around and love life fiercely. And they ask questions like, what does it mean to walk with God? What is the grace of God? But do you know what I've done? No, and I don't care. Because, well, first of all, let's redefine things that have been done unto you, which is very different. And even with, some of the part, that might look like our choices, Christ never asked me the question. He never asked me that question, not even when I was sobbing hysterically, after being sexually abused, after being raped, after choosing a promiscuous lifestyle that led me, to 4 abortions, when I was bawling, when crying my heart out to him. He never asked that question. Listen, Moni, do you remember all the things you've done? Well, let me remind you some of them. Not once. So if he hasn't done this with me or to me, not that I didn't deserve it, right? Oh boy, not once. Who can I think I am to do this to someone else who's just as loved by Christ as I was, as I am, just as loved as all you are, just as blessed as I am being his child? So this past year has been very tumultuous, to say the least. I was here last year in October. I got back home, and I knew something was wrong with me, and I got diagnosed with breast cancer. And everything had been on fast forward ever since. I started chemo, and I had chemo for 6.5 months, which was probably by far the most miserable experience of my life. And then I had surgery, and then radiation, 27 sessions of radiation. And the day after I was done with radiation, I got on the plane to come here. I've always loved life. I always, looked like the full half of the glass, and I always thought, life is beautiful and it's definitely worth living, but my goodness, even so much more now. Just being here with you this morning, I cannot tell you, it really, really tasted so much more beautiful, so much more, my goodness, it's like when you enjoy all the spices in your foods and you feel like, oh, this is ginger, oh, I love the galangal, oh, I love the, lemongrass. That's how it feels. So thank you. Thank you for allowing the Holy Spirit to live, in you and among you. I felt it through and through. During my chemo, the only thought I had, besides, am I ever going to get through, pooping myself and, puking myself, was I'm gonna be on the road again. I'm gonna hit the road running. I was one time when I told God, why me? I did ask him this, and I thank him over and over for allowing us to ask the questions. And Of course I didn't get an answer, because it's like, why do we get cancer? Well, let me think. I don't ever remember God having anyone, desire for any of us to get ever sick. Maybe because of, that's how life works sometimes. I don't know, maybe because I was next in line, who knows? But what I felt was his arms loving me over and over. And I woke up one night because I said, I'm gonna be out there again. You're not done with me, I know this. There's still so much more good to be done. We're not done yet. But what am I going to talk about? And that had been my prayer, for days and nights. And literally I woke up in the middle of the night, and it was like he told me, write them down. In me and with me, but not for me. And I asked again. I really, I woke up, Christy, I said, would you please stay and pray with me? In me and with me, but not for me. And then I realized, can we turn on the PowerPoint, please? Oh, here we are. Hello. Yeah, I just realized it. And then I realized that, okay, please tell me what would be one thing that God would like to have done, would like to do, and that he wouldn't be able to do by himself. Because I couldn't think of one. But maybe it's just me. It's not for him. He doesn't need us. Okay, we walk in Jesus' footprints, right? So, what did he do? He, healed and fed and taught and preached. He doesn't need us to feed him. He doesn't need to be healed by us. He doesn't need to be taught by us. And he definitely doesn't want, or maybe doesn't need, any of us to preach to him. But he knows that just like we did, my husband and I, we needed to be fed by John and Margaret. We needed to be healed through John and Margaret. We needed to be taught by them and through them. And definitely we needed to hear the preaching. And I said, okay, this is it. In him and with him, but not for him. You get to see the phenomenal team that is behind me. It's mixed in with the survivors. And that is the day I graduated chemo. We kind of, had a small party. The beauty of these pictures is that you cannot, maybe some of you can, but can tell me who is a survivor of human trafficking and who is a team member. Tell me if you can see the difference. Because, just like you said, he didn't come to, make us look good on the outside. Though it's some of the things, this is also part of the things that we do, We help them look good on the outside. But my goodness, no. The smiles, the strength that is in them, the resilience that comes through their faces and in their eyes, that's something worth living and fighting for. Can we move on, please? So we have a shelter. When we started this, as Deborah mentioned to you, 11 years ago, when I woke up in the middle of the night, having no idea, why is God waking me in the middle of the night, and what is this? Because I just knew we had to make a turn. It had to be a big turn. It had to make a difference in our world. I told my team we're going to brainstorm and we're going to pray over this, because what I'm asking God is to give us something as big as he is. I don't want us to be lost in the crowd. When have you ever seen Jesus lost in the crowd? Whenever in the New Testament you had a hard time finding him? Was he, really, I don't know whether he was, feeding or healing or preaching or teaching. You always knew where he was, right? In the crowds. But you knew he was there. He was never hiding. He was never lost. Oh, I wish I'd know who the healer is. Where is that rabbi? I can't see him. They always knew where he is. That woman in that crowd went straight to touch his garment. She knew where to go and what to touch. And I told my team, we're not going to be lost in the crowd. And we're not going to be hiding. And when government, officials, top government officials told me that we need a safe house, a shelter, an emergency shelter for survivors of human trafficking, I said, okay, this is what we'll do. I sold the private, medical practice I was running and opened the shelter. But I said, remember a few things from the very beginning. It will always going to be the best. We'll always show God's standards and principles. And if you have a problem with those standards and principles that run this place, you'll have to take it up to God. And what do you think the very first words were on the day of the inauguration of the shelter? They came to me and, said, congratulations, this is the best place our country has ever had, and I mean, we never had an emergency shelter, but, among all the places that we've seen around the world, this is the best by far. However, we think it's a little too good. We believe it's too much. Interesting. I said, for whom? God forbid. Would it be too good or too much for your loved one? For your daughter, your niece, your nephew, your son, your sister, your aunt? Would you tell me aside to tell me that I'm giving too much to your loved one? Well, not really. Why not? What's the difference between your loved one and my loved one and somebody else's loved one we haven't met yet? You only have two options, I said. This is how it's always going to be. Take it or leave it. Oh, we'll take it. Well, fine. Let's get the job done then. And for many years, besides the shelter, we had a side project in mind. We have the survivors who go through the program, which is usually 18 months long, but we don't have a one-size-fits-all. Have you tried clothes that are one-size-fits-all? You don't know whether you're a cucumber or a papaya, or, am I, Miss Universe? Because you can't make anything out of it. We don't have that. Everything is adapted to the individual. And so if we have underage girls referred to us, of course they're not going to be kicked out at the end of the 18 months, length of program when they're not even 18. Or maybe they need more time to heal. They need more time to learn. And even at the end of the program, some of them may not be prepared to face an independent life without being vulnerable again. And so for many years, we prayed for a side project called the Transition Houses. Deborah might remember one of the church buildings was in Villor. And we've had, this was the very first property our missionaries bought back in 1992. It's a beautiful house. And a few years ago, because it had not been used, as its full potential, I told my husband that I'm going to pray that this will, be for the foundation. And he looked at me and said, you'll never have money to buy it. I never said I want to buy it. And a year and a half ago, the DS came to me and he said, Moni, I need to tell you something. For months and months, I had this, thought in my head and I can't get rid of it. That the Villor house should be given to the foundation to be used for the survivors. And so it's now being used as one of the transition houses. And by God's grace, we were able to build 4 studio apartments. You can see them here. And the Villor house is used as a transition house for the survivors without children. The 4 studio apartments, because they have a small, garden too, is used for the survivors who are in that transition to, towards complete independence, for the survivors with children. We were able to inaugurate them last year. And this is part of the inauguration. We can move on. Well, so Moni, you may ask, with good reasons. So, how many of the things that you needed, you had in place before you started? None. If there's one good lesson I learned over and over in this ministry, is that resources will always follow the vision. It's never vice versa. Resources always follow the vision. If it's a God-given vision, okay, what exactly from that thing you think he doesn't remember or he doesn't know that we're going to need and that he's not capable of providing? Because I cannot think of one. We had a group of girls who started working in a nursing home. And because in the nursing home, they fought, for a few good months, they fought bed bugs. Of course, they brought bed bugs to the shelter. So 3 of the rooms we have, because our shelter has a capability of housing 16 survivors at a time. And those 3 of these rooms had to be completely locked up, and fumigated for weeks in row. And even after, fumigation, we still found that, the creepy, crawly creatures alive. So we stripped these 3 rooms buck naked. I mean, it was just the ceiling and the cement on the floor that was left. So what do you do now, okay? Because all of a sudden, you have basically 10 beds that are not available anymore. And I told our team decided to pray for this. And I get a call from the sales director from IKEA. When we started 11 years ago, I went to IKEA and turned in a request for support. It wasn't much, not even a A4-page, project description. And I received 0 responses. I mean, not even hello, goodbye, nothing. Years later, I was put in contact with the sales director from IKEA. It was actually before we opened the church building and the Vilor house for the refugees, for the Ukrainian refugees. When I got word from the sales director from IKEA, tell me what your needs are. Well, what do you mean? He said, go look on our website and choose what you need and tell me the exact number of each item you need. Well, you don't say this to Moni. I was like, okay, fine, but then I was like, and so we started praying for these 3 rooms. What are we going to do about it? So I get this call from him, and he's like, Moni, I just walked out of the meeting with the headquarters in Sweden, and they told us that the new project we have to implement is furnishing a room in a shelter for abused women. And he said, the first person I thought of was you. I'm like, wonderful. I don't have 1 room, I have 3. He called back, and within half an hour, he got back to me, and he said 3 rooms. And not only this, but they send their, staff to put the puzzles all together, because you know what. Like, what exactly from our needs is hidden from God? You know the verse that says that the word hasn't even reached our lips, our request hasn't even reached our lips, and he already knows it? These 3 rooms, they even had stuff that I wouldn't have asked for sure, like paintings up on the wall, a specific kind of lamp. But God knows. He made it all possible. Can we move on, please? Oh, not for him. But God, I want to serve you. Wonderful. Go wash feet. Go welcome my prodigal son. Go welcome my prodigal daughter. Go feed the ones who haven't been fed yet. God clothed the ones who are walking around, with just the skimpy skirts they were given by the traffickers. Go feed these little kids. Go take care of the orphans and the widows. You look at these three smiley faces, and I'm glad. And if you remember the first picture that was up on the screen, these three were among the children you saw laying down. This was in the church during service. And the reason I wanted that picture to be up there is because my prayer is that we would all feel like them in the presence of God. Free, no fear, no shame, no judgment. Grace, love, and mercy over and over. If this is what we get, and if this is what you all got this morning with one hand, and I'm pretty sure because everybody here looks, again, this is just what it looks like. I don't know what's, the story behind the face. But we all look, well-fed, nicely dressed, cared for, and loved. If this is what we got this morning from God, unconditional love, grace, and mercy with one hand, why would we have a problem giving away with the other what's not even ours? Does it say Moni's blessings? Does it say Christy's grace, Deborah's mercy? No, it's God's DNA all over it. It's God's name on all of them. So if it's not mine, why do I have the tendency to tuck it nicely under my butt and sit on it? No, let me think about this, God, if I'm going to share it or not. And so these three kids had been through hell. What happens in many cases, the survivors are being trafficked along with their children, or the traffickers want them to have a child. Because if you have the survivor's child in your family, how many of us as parents would we have the second thoughts if our child is put in a bathtub and poured hot water over his legs if I don't do what I'm told? Are you going to have second thoughts? Because if you do, we need to talk about the service. Really? Just like one of these little ones, when his mother, who by the way was only allowed to see him twice a year, if she wasn't doing what they wanted her to do, they would put out their cigarettes on his face so that she would remember, you don't say no to us. Many times, too many times, we look at a person and judge. We think we know. Are we ready to see the storm that's in that person's heart or mind? Because this is one thing that happens over and over in the hearts and minds of the survivors of any form of human trafficking. The other little one, the blonde one, when his father, who was the mom's trafficker, when she didn't do what she was told, he beat this little kid an inch to his death, only in the head. You'll see a picture in a few more moments, in the hospital bed with his head the size of a pumpkin, all bruised. Again, we don't know the story behind that person. Stop and listen. Let's move on, please. You see him up there. Now, the other picture you see with that girl is one of our survivors who is in the non-residential program. We have two sides of the program. The residential part, where the survivors come to the emergency shelter, But we also have a non-residential program for the ones who had been identified sometime later after the case has been, cracked down. And because sometimes it can take months, maybe, up to a year or two between, when the case is cracked down until the other survivors are being found, they started a family. They have a job, maybe they have the support of, someone in the family, and so they don't need to be in the shelter. But they have lots of other needs. And so this is what we come. We come alongside, and we provide all the services that the others receive, except for the protected shelter. And by the way, among the services we provide, we have counseling and therapy. Our psychologist is one of the 2 specialists in Romania specialized in working with survivors of human trafficking, different forms of human trafficking. And even when we don't have a case referred to us, the prosecutors would call and say, I want, your psychologist to, work on the, counseling part and therapy part, because the emotional scars, the psychological and mental scars, we don't see. We cannot see what's in my heart or what has been on my mind, for many years after I've been abused. You were only able to see the outer signs that I was willing to share, whether it was being cocky, or, living a promiscuous lifestyle, or very sarcastic, or dressed in a very inappropriate way. These were the only things that you could see, but not the heart and not the emotional scars that I was carrying. It's the same with everyone. We provide complete legal assistance and representation in court, and by God's grace, we haven't lost a case in court since we started. We have phenomenal lawyers, husband and wife, who work together. They are a power force. And every time there is a case, and she has to, be in court the next day, she doesn't sleep the night before. And so she's rewriting everything as if somebody else wrote it the first time. 5 a.m, she's like sick to her stomach, and then turns to her husband, he's like, what am I going to do? And he cups her face, and he says, when was the last time we were in court and you didn't see God at work? And I mean, guys, in one particular case, we had 7 survivors referred, to us, all 7 being trafficked by the same organized crime ring. And one of the key people in that organized crime ring had been asked to testify, was asked by the judge to testify, and he refused 3 times. And there's nothing you can do. He was a key person, he would have, provided key elements. And so we started praying for this guy because we had no idea how it's going to end. Well, the last appeal in court, the last day in court, for the case, this guy all of a sudden, he's like, Your Honor, may I say something? I would like to testify today. And they all looked at like, well, we asked you 3 times and you denied. Well, yes, but I want to testify today. And he vomited all. It was all out there. It was, if this is not God's miracle, please redefine it for me or for us. And so when we have specifically asked for survivors to be deposed in a separate room, not in the same courtroom with traffickers and their acolytes, most of the times, the request is being approved. So this is one of them. And on the other picture is one of the little kids in our shelter. His mom is just a superb woman, and she's working so hard. But there was one of the days when I had chemo, and I was miserable. And there is a passage in 2 Corinthians that talks about that with the comfort you have been comforted, to comfort others. Well, I was miserable. And I told Christy, I said, I don't want to lay in bed. It's not going to make me feel any better. I want to go there. I want them to feel miserable too, right? I mean, hey, like, why not just me? I got to the shelter, And little Michael just woke up, and his mom was, bringing him downstairs, and he was screaming, I don't know why, crying and screaming. The moment he saw me, he ran towards me. Crying stopped. He put his head on my lap, and this was it. If you zoom in, there's one tear still, hanging on to his little cheeks. But to this day, you ask me, did I comfort him or did he comfort me? Oh, I'm here to testify. He comforted me more than any of my doctors did. Let's move on, please. Feeding, healing, teaching, preaching. Look up in that picture where you see all the fresh produce. Please remember this. Resources follow the vision. We were down to $16 in all our accounts put together. And I got to the shelter that morning, freaking out. And I told the survivors, I'm sorry, but we don't have money for food. And we don't have money for the bills. But we needed to. I had a whole list of groceries that needed to be bought. I said, but we're going to go to the market in faith. And they looked at me thinking, good God, she didn't take her meds this morning. It was before I got cancer. And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? I said, let's get in the car. So we go to the market. And we really set foot in the market. And this is a place I've been, doing my shopping, my grocery shopping for the past 30 years. And the family that we usually buy vegetables from, she's like, oh, Moni, come over. She said, my husband and I were just talking that we wanted to call you. God just laid on our heart, to buy this, 40 pounds of potatoes and 20 pounds of onions for you guys. The girls immediately, the three girls from the, who were with me, turned around and said, did you talk to them? I'm like, I've been with you the whole morning. I didn't touch my phone. We carried the 40 pounds of potatoes, 20 pounds of onions to the car. We go back to the market, and the young man that we usually buy fruit from, he said, oh, I'm so glad you're here because I just wanted to call you. I have 20 pounds of apples. And 20 pounds of, I can't even remember the other fruit, I think were plums, that I wanted to give you. The girls looked towards me and said, don't ask me the question. I was with you the whole morning. Let's take this to the car. We walked back into the market. Another lady that we usually buy some things from, veggies from, said, I'm so glad you're here because my husband and I were talking. We have these big banana boxes with carrots and bell peppers, but they're a little wrinkled. We wanted to give to you if you're not upset to take them. I'm wrinkled too. Like, what does that make me? We'll take them. And I looked at the girls, I said, don't you ask me the question. I was with you the whole morning. And the day went on. We went to the little place in our market where there's a family business, and they have cold meats and cheeses, and they're absolutely fabulous. And the owner said to me, tell me what you need. I'm like, oh, but let me tell you. She's like, tell me what you need. Says, as I'm telling her what we need, the salami and the bologna and, the cheese and this and that, I'm counting in my head. I'm like, Lord, I don't know. I don't know when or how am I going to pay for this. So when she's done putting this in bags, I said, Daniela, listen, I don't have the money for it. And she said, did I ask you for the money? The girls looked at me and I said, don't ask the question, please. We took it all back to the shelter. We got at the shelter, and the kitchen is now full. We have a really big kitchen, and it's now full. And the girls looked at me and said, so this is what God looks like. I said, no, this is one of God's many facets. And while we're in the kitchen trying to figure out, what we're going to do with all these veggies and fruit and, this and that, I get a call from very large supermarket. 3 months before this, I sent them a request for some of the non-perishable foods, like sugar, flour, oil, rice, pasta, whatever, and asked them for whatever they could give, And I had not received a word from them. So they called me, and they said, Ms. Boseff, we want to apologize. We know you sent the request 3 months before, but this and that. We have it all ready to be sent to you. It's on the way. We have 10 pallets ready. I said, 10 pallets of what? 10 pallets of all the stuff that you requested. I don't have place for 10 pallets. Are you crazy? But we did get 10 pallets. Let me tell you this. When you decide to set your foot out of the plane where you're safe, or out of the home you're safe, and you decide to be part of this or part of another ministry that God is calling you to, just remember this. Buckle in. That's all I'm telling you. It's going to be the ride of your life. There's nothing that you need in this ministry or in any other one that He doesn't know about. That He will have you, roll over, play dead, for me because I want to see how great of an actor you are. No, He's going to provide it all. Seriously, guys, if we're faithful to say, yes, here I am, use me, fill me up, do whatever you want to do, God, because you've already done your part.
Wow. We're going to take a moment and pray.